Hey guys, what's good? This is Sharon, and you are listening to the Blue Inversion podcast. This is episode 5, and I'm really excited for today's episode because I get to talk about Linux, which is on at the top of my hobbies list. And I will not say passionate because I didn't yet get very deep into it, but it's been 2 to 3 years. I've been using a lot of Linux distros, and the whole Blender workflow with it is phenomenal in my opinion. I've been enjoying the stability. So let's get started and let's talk about how I switched and things I did not like about the Windows workflow with Blender and the other things I do with Linux. So let's get started with Linux distros first. What distros am I using on this PC? So this PC has Linux Mint. It is the most basic, beginner-friendly, user-friendly kind of distro you can get. What made me stick to Linux Mint for my main PC is that most other distros are great for their own purposes, but if you're relying on a system on a daily basis to meet deadlines like I am currently, I cannot afford the system going berserk, and then I'm flipping out and then unable to meet the deadlines for the day, like my everydays, and then also the podcast. So this is why I have Linux Mint here. And the second most important reason why I love this Linux Mint environment is that most other distros have many other great features. They're great in their own ways, but Linux Mint has this awesome feature that I love about it is that it has all the drivers for the peripherals set up and easy to use. Even if it is not working perfectly out of the box, you can easily configure it and make it work perfectly. Even with my tablet here, it's a Wacom Intuos, and it's very plug and play kind of experience. Yes, it takes a little bit of work to get the hotkeys and the key map set up to give you more functionality in different programs like Blender and Krita. But anyways, I use the keyboard all the time because I'm not going to remember two sets of shortcuts for the same program basically. So when I'm sculpting using the tablet, I'm still using the keyboard on my left hand. So all the shortcuts are there. So I just use it as a mouse and for the pressure sensitivity. So that's all. I'm not really big into the key map setups for Krita or Blender. So Linux Mint works perfectly for me. And if you're like me trying to transition, then I'll always suggest Linux Mint. Go for it. I have also experimented with many other recent distros and also tried building one for myself using Arch Linux. And I did build it, and it's on the laptop that I have. This is a HP mid-range laptop. I do very unimportant work on this laptop, and it's not really related to Blender or not very professional stuff. I'll get into that in later episodes maybe. And so I always it is completely Frankenstein surgery going on with that laptop. Like I change the Linux distro every month or so, experimenting new things and all that stuff. So the Arch Linux thing worked, but it is so frustrating at times because, like I said, I'm a hobbyist for Linux, not a super passionate person. So at one point, Arch Linux was getting a little bit too much work for me to get easy things working. Like I'm not always using the laptop for work, right? So if I have to watch a movie, let's say on YouTube Movies or Amazon Prime, then all those DRM settings get screwed up, and you cannot watch the things you have bought basically on the Arch Linux system that I made. Of course, I did not make it perfectly. That's why it's not working. I'm not saying Arch Linux is not compatible, but getting the whole thing to work, it's like all the dependencies, all the packages, how to make them all work together. It's too much of a hassle for me currently. Maybe I'll get into it later on again, but then I uninstalled it and switched to. Currently on that system, I have Ubuntu Studio. That's for the purpose that I am using that laptop for. On another episode, I will be having a lot of episodes on Linux because I think a fair percentage of Blender users have switched to Linux or always used Linux. So there's a niche for that, and I'll be addressing them and maybe get some conversations going with this kind of episodes about Linux and Blender, how they work together. So what made me switch from Windows? So I am a complete Windows user since I ever got my hands on a computer, PC, laptop, whatever, even at school or wherever I went, the laptop, everything had Windows. Windows is fine, all right? And most of the things that you want to do on Linux can be done on Windows as well. And that's true for most operating systems. Most of the things can be done. It's all about how easy something is for you to do. Like on Linux, the way things are installed, like the software center where you have all the list of apps, they're not very updated, and you have to get the latest version from the websites. And then a few things that do not exactly work the way you would like it to work. Like you have to go to the website and download all the softwares that you need. So in that respect, it's not very bad, but Linux does not support most of the things Windows does. Very few things are supported on Linux, and I'm not saying Linux should support everything Windows has. It's a different ecosystem completely, and most of the things you want to run, if you want to run Windows, let's say, then you can use Wine, of course. It's a virtual environment where you can run Windows software. It's like a platform where you can install. Basically, you have Windows within Linux, and it works fine most of the times, and you can run Windows software in that. So that's one thing. If you do not want to completely switch to Linux all the time. Now, the number one thing that made me switch from Windows to Linux is that there was this breaking point that this policy that Windows have, everything else is all right, like I'm not very unhappy with Windows. The amount of time that I've spent on Windows is a very long time, much longer than I have been using Linux, and it has always worked perfectly. I have used Windows 7 and Windows 8. After that, I kind of switched. So the problem is that they force you to update, and you can't even turn it off. Like if you do not update, you basically cannot work on it anymore. You are forced. It's a mandatory thing that you have to update your system. So that kind of gets in the way of your work. Like if I'm working on something late night, and then I have to get something done by the morning. That like there's a deadline, and then for some reason I installed something. I have to restart the system, and bam, there goes Windows, and it is updating, right? And the update takes so long. Do not turn off the computer. The progress bar also is all messed up. It doesn't even show you correctly how much time it's actually going to take. It restarts like 10,000 times while it updates, and you just can't get your work done. Like it was a horror story for me whenever this happened. Like you can't work on Windows, or you can't finish your project that night. Basically, you have to wait till the morning, keep the laptop up and running until it updates completely, and then comes the best part. Even if the update is done, your system becomes substantially like 10 times slower, laggy, and it's just annoying. Like every time that update happens, I don't know why that is, and I don't know if they have changed this whole scenario, the updates policy, or the way the updates work now. If the getting slower thing is still a thing, I don't know. I do not keep up with Windows anymore, but back then it was a huge issue with me, and it felt like I'm not in control of the system. Instead, it's like a company which is controlling what I can or cannot do on my system. no, not to offend anything, or I'm not saying that their business model is not right. Of course, you have to make sure everything is updated. A lot of security stuff is going on. I get it, but it's just not made for me. And the kind of work that I did, I mainly used open source softwares, and they're very much compatible with Linux. So there's no reason to stick with Windows. The only thing that stopped me for a long time using Linux is that Linux is has this steep learning curve, and it's not very intuitive. Sometimes you have to look it up. Like, it's like a whole new software you have to learn. Windows is very, like, how many times do you go to Stack Overflow for Windows? You don't, like, unless you're trying to do something very weird and very specific, and you're trying to install some kind of niche software which is not very mainstream, then you might need to look up Stack Overflow or get something done regarding that. But most of the time, Windows just works out of the box, and all your peripherals and everything is properly set up. It's just plug and play. So yeah, Windows is great in that respect. So Windows does not have that much of a barrier for new users. So that is one thing that is one of the reasons I think Windows is so popular. And I would still love to work on Windows PC or systems for other works, maybe. But right now I'm very deep into Linux, and I do not really feel comfortable with any other operating systems. But this learning curve thing kept me waiting on Linux for a long time. But then once I got started with it, I will not say it's wrong that Linux has a very steep learning curve. But the fact that made me stay was that I'm interested in all this stuff. Like, seriously interested in programming, and Linux opened up this whole new world for me. Like, you have the system, you have the root permission to do it on Linux, and that is how you do the workflow on Linux is encouraging you to take control of your system and know at least know the ins and outs of how the operating system is working to a basic level before you can install and do some moderately important stuff on the system backend level stuff. So it gets you to learn a lot of things, how operating systems in general work, parts of it like the kernel, and how the root user and the other user groups are maintained. So Linux got me started with this brand new journey of taking full control of your operating system and environment. Like, even the home button, like you can control each and every aspect of your operating system. That's very phenomenal for me. For example, on my Linux Mint right now, I have my home button, the menu button customized. I have exactly what I wanted to show on the taskbar. I have the temperatures for my GPU, my CPU. I have alerts for whenever the temperatures exceed some 80 degrees Celsius. I had this issue with my heat sink not working properly. So I was worried when I was putting something on rendering, and then I was off to college. Then my PC was basically gonna heat up and die or something when I'm not present in my work studio. Then what I made is that I made this script in Bash. If you do not know, Bash is the scripting language for Linux. And then what it does is that it takes this KDE Connect was a package that came distributed with the KDE desktop environment that I was using at that moment. And then what it does is that it connects your phone, your Android phone, using a common Wi-Fi router. Then if you're using the same Wi-Fi from your phone and the PC, then you can connect them together and send commands back and forth from the phone and the PC, basically. So what I did was, I had this old phone with a SIM card that I connected with the PC, and then I went to college, basically. And the thing that I programmed was, every time that alert is triggered, that it has exceeded some, let's say, 95 degrees Celsius, that is really high, and it is high for some sustained amount of time, then it triggers a command using the KDE Connect package that send an SMS to my main mobile phone that I took to college. And then basically what it did was that it told me the temperature. So if I felt like it's overheating or it was something unexpected for the rendering purpose that I set it up for, then if I got worried about whether it's gonna heat up, then I can send this SMS back that said, let's say, shut down or stop render. Like I literally typed it using my phone and then send an SMS back. I even had a email version of that I can email it back. And then as soon as I did that, it executed its command. It read the title of that email, and then it matched it with some preset hard-coded function commands to execute according to the title of the email or SMS. And then if I say stop Blender, then it would kill any processes going on related to Blender. So the rendering will stop. And then also it will send me a confirmation that Blender has been stopped via SMS. So I get an SMS back when I was in college. So that was super cool. I enjoyed it so much. And it would have not been possible with Windows. I'm not saying it's not possible at all, but it might be possible, but I would have never gone down this route of even thinking in this way, because Windows does not encourage you to do this kind of low-level coding things using your operating system. I guess you can do it using PowerShell. These days, they have come up with some new terminal kind of functionality. And even back in the days, I believe you can do it. But it was not wired in that way that you will automatically stumble upon something like that. So yeah, so it was really cool. And ever since I've explored Linux more and more, and it's very easy to get started with machine learning and other AI algorithms that are open source and available on GitHub. You can kind of deploy them and implement them on your system using Linux quite easily. I'm not sure how easy it is with Windows, but once you get the hang of the basics of Linux, then you can easily test them out. And I think it was very, very helpful. And yeah, so that brings me to the end of this episode. The time lapse is also done. I would like to say that Blender works seamlessly smooth with Linux. You also get the terminal by default, I believe, and you can check for errors and debugging stuff. If you develop add-ons, like I've been getting into developing add-ons recently. It's been a few months, so it's very helpful for debugging purposes when I'm using Blender. And if you're thinking that you will be missing out on a lot of apps and softwares, then I guess you might want to do some more research, because I felt the same way at first. But once I started using Linux, I found out that there are a lot of open source alternatives. You can basically use any software you want, which are compatible on Windows using Wine. So that's already out there. So that's a possibility. And yeah, so I think I got started with the Linux thing with this episode, and I hope you enjoyed. So if you're using Linux for Blender, then let's have a chat, leave a comment below, and which distro you're using. That would be fun. And this is just a beginning to a lot of other episodes coming up regarding Blender, Linux, and more stuff that you can do with both of them, basically. So I'm very happy that I did this podcast, that I can talk about this, and maybe some of you can share some more stuff that is interesting with Blender and Linux. Let's get the conversation going, and I'll keep you updated of anything new I find out about Linux or Blender or some. You'll definitely see more episodes on Linux, because that's one of my hobbies. And of course, I do not do this every day, but I should do it more often. I hope you know that we have the Blue Archive second YouTube channel, where I answer questions related to answer questions which are related to Blender, the software. Not very general questions, like very specific questions which are narrow in their topic and subject. And then I answered that directly on the as a video, very raw footage, 1 or 2 minutes video, and put it on that second channel. So check that out. If you have any questions, you can leave them anywhere. Just anywhere you can reach me on the community tab or here on the comments. Just let me know of any very Blender specific question, and I'll try to make a video on it. Also, in the last episode, I said that I'll be getting into art series, that is sticking to a general subject for the everydays for more than one artwork in a row. And I'll be making like a whole series of artworks related to that general subject for a long time before I get bored of it. But let me tell you one thing, it failed miserably. I could not work. I could not make it work at all. The mic is acting funny today. And basically, I was straining my brain to come up with ideas which never work. So instead, I had this other idea which came in pretty easily, I guess, the whale thing. So I kind of went with the flow, and I kind of understood that this is not going to work if it is every day. If you work on a art series for a long time, you have a lot of time to think and ponder, collect ideas and inspiration, then I think art series can be a viable method of doing work. But if you're into everydays like me, then I think art series is not a good idea. And I think it was a pretty fruitful experiment to do. And the result is no, it doesn't work for me. So thank you so much for watching. I'll end it here. Thank you so much for any listens you have given me on any other platform. It really means a lot. I hope you subscribe to them. And if you have any suggestion or questions for the next episode, then please leave them in the comments below. I'm enjoying this podcast a lot. Thank you for all the support and all the appreciation emails that I've been getting. Thank you so much, and see you on the next episode. Till then, take care. This was Sharon.